Good afternoon, everyone. Vielle, Google Hangout, 23rd of March 2018. CPD accredited. Remember, if anybody wants a CPD certificate, you just have to make contact after the Hangout. I will give you all a question during the Hangout just to prove that you haven't just logged in for 2 seconds. Remember, you should sign up to our YouTube channel, and that way you'll always receive notifications. And of course, we now have podcasts. So if you download the podcast and you sign up to Vielle on the podcast on the App Store, you'll be able to listen to us on the way home, on the way to work, when you're walking your dog. Right, so today we've got a great team around us. We've got me, Neil Singer. We have Dale Henry.
Good afternoon.
We have our man in Scotland, Graham Waddell.
Afternoon.
And we have Andrew Hynard, of the CEO of the Howard Walden estate. And we have, you can say hello if you want, Andrew.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hi, good afternoon.
And with Paul Davis of Nimbus Maps.
Hi, guys.
Now, I'm going to just start off by saying a little bit about the guests, because it's great having Andrew, who I've known for many, many years. And many years ago, when I was young and didn't know my way around the property world, Andrew taught me how to do deals at what was then called Jones Lang Wootton. And in fact, Andrew, I'm very sad to see that the building's been knocked down.
Yeah, it's a hole in the ground. I walked past there the other day, and it's you can see right through it. So you and I have been around for a long time, Neil.
Yeah, yeah. You're always my boss, so slightly older, right? So the Howard Walden estate. I'll let you talk about that in a minute, Andrew.
Yeah.
There's a slight echo. Where's my echo coming from? Dale, are you muted? So Andrew is the CEO of Howard Walden Estate, formerly of JLL, former chairman of the Investment Property Forum, and a current chairman of the RICS Commercial Property Forum. Have I missed anything?
No, that's fine. That's the
all.
principal roles and interests.
That's all. That's all. And Paul, as a founder and director of Assured Property Group and a director of Nimbus Maps, and realized in 2015 how helpful it would be to open up their data to others, and hence created Nimbus Maps, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's first of all do a quick roundup of news. Right, so I'm going to start. Let's do a quick rundown of things that have happened. Right, MIPIM. So Dale and I went to MIPIM a few weeks ago to see what was going on. I can report that it was sunny for 2 days and it rained for 1 day. Even. The mood, I thought, was quite interesting in MIPIM. I felt there was definitely a lot less people than normal, whether that's to do with the market or whether it's to do with undercover reporters who were supposed to be prowling, although I didn't see any. But the market feedback was actually the market was quite stagnant, and most people seemed to be quite cautious. There was a lot of interest, though, in the conference area. I felt that there was a lot of buzz around technology. There were certain tech firms that taken stands. Paul, did you go? Were Nimbus there?
We didn't in the end, actually. No, we decided not to. Yeah,
I mean, I saw Dacia were there, and they had a lot of people buzzing around their stand. So I thought MIPIM was good. I thought there was people talking. There's always lots of lawyers in MIPIM, always, I find. So I thought the market was positive but cautious. People were a little bit nervous. Right, should we go on to what's happening in the market? Dale, should we talk about what's happening in the market, Vielle wise?
Yeah, sure. Well, we've launched a number of new sales this week. Some here, some up in Scotland, which Graham can give a quick overview of those ones. But just to run you through our new properties. So the first one we've just launched is a very interesting industrial estate ground lease investment in Bolton, which you can see now, which is a multi-let on 26 ground leases with an average weighted unexpired lease term of 66 years. It's a highly secure investment with the rent payable based upon the rental value of the land. It's VAT-free, and we're seeking offers in the region of 1.9 million, which is 5%. The other one we've just launched is another highly secure investment in Plymouth, which is situated in the town centre on Cornwall Street, with 70% of the income secured against Grand Metropolitan Estates, who are a AAA covenant. They've got net assets of about £170 million. The property comprises 3 units with upper parts as well, and the weighted average unexpired lease term is just over 27 years. And we're seeking £665,000, which is 7%. In Rugby, we've got a freehold retail investment let to the very secure covenant Holland and Barrett. They've been in occupation since 1999, and it's let off a rebased rent. We are asking £475,000, so an attractive lot size, and that reflects 6%. The next one we've got for sale is a petrol filling station in Wallingford in Oxfordshire. As you can see, very prominent roadside location, let for a further just over 10 years with a guaranteed rental increase in 2023. And we're asking 1.15 million, which is 8.25%, rising to a guaranteed 9.34%. In Torquay Town Centre, we're selling a well-secured retail investment let to William Hill, let on a new lease from 2016 at a rebased rent, and that's available at £265,000, which is a high yield of just over 10%. And finally, we've got a supermarket investment in Ivybridge, let to the full cooperative group Covenant. That's got a further 10.5 years unexpired. It's the only supermarket in the town. The tenants just recently spent about £1 million on the store, and we're seeking 2.73 million, which is 6.5%.
Okay, Graham, do you want to talk about Scotland?
Yeah, I do. The reason you didn't see any undercover reporters, Neil, in MIPIM is because they were undercover. But
no, I've got very good eyesight.
Yeah, in Scotland, we just concluded the sale of the card factory yesterday, which was in Elgin. That went through yesterday, which was good news. The Sally Beauty unit in Perth, we brought out 2 weeks ago today, and that is due to sell next week to a private buyer from down south. So obviously our client's delighted that will be hopefully done and dusted within 3 weeks of bringing to the market. We are marketing Superdrug in Ayr, which is quite substantial building in Ayr Town Centre, let to Superdrug for another 3.5 years, very attractive net yield of 11%, and quite a few asset management angles on that.
Wow, that's a beautiful building, isn't it?
It is. It's a very nice building. Former bank, but it's been adapted and extended specifically for Superdrug for their occupation. And just launched on the website today a flagship unit in Union Street, Aberdeen, let to the iconic retailer of All Saints. Probably one of the nicest units I've been in. Didn't buy anything, obviously. It's far too young and trendy for me, but great unit, let to All Saints for another 5 years till January 2023.
What's the nature? Do you know? I should know, but I don't. What's the nature of our client there, out of interest?
He's a private client.
Private client.
Private Scottish client who's owned it for a number of years. So that's now on the market, 1.7 million. We've reported on 2 or 3 other things which we'll be able to share with you at the next hangout. Just also to say, Neil, after the last hangout, I got a call from a potential investor who'd been watching the hangout in Costa Rica. So for people who don't think we are worldwide, our reach is worldwide, it certainly is. He'd phoned and heard about the Superdrug in Ayr and wanted a bit more information.
And they understood you. They understood the accent.
Well,
we didn't talk too much Spanish, did we?
No.
Although of course all our properties are translated. We have professional teams of translators. So everything which we sell, I think, is in Russian, in Arabic, in Chinese, etc. So that's what we do as a business. Right. So thank you very much, Graham. So if you want to buy property, you know where to come. And if you want to sell property, you know where to come. Right. News. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to hold off on the news. I'd like to bring in the guests. Let's bring in the guests early. Andrew.
Neil.
Now, Andrew, I'm going to give you the floor. Do you want to tell everyone about the Howard Walden estate?
Yeah, sure. So I think you might have a map that you can bring up.
Yes, let me do that.
Which will probably be helpful in terms of just sort of describing where we are. That looks great. So
there you are. How's that?
Yeah, I can see it well, and I hope our fellow hangouters can see it as well. So in the bottom right-hand corner there, you'll see Oxford Circus Tube, and therefore running east to west, southwest, southeast corner is Oxford Street. And we are a family-owned estate covering about 92 acres, and we're basically everything within, or at least the extremities of the boundary are within that mauve line that you can see working its way around. So the green corner, just to the northwest of Oxford Circus there, is Cavendish Square to get your bearings. And then we go, if you follow up Harley Street, across to the right, up Portland Place by the BBC, we wrap around the back of the BBC. Heading north, you go up the Hallam Street, come around Hallam Street and Park West, head north again onto the Marylebone Road, left or west, and then you come back down, if everybody can see the screen, if we got it up. You come down the High Street, all the way down the High Street, and you can then see that it sort of 2/3 of the way down, it kicks to the southeast, to the right as you're looking at it, down Marylebone Lane, which has been, over the last couple of years, seen a lot of improvement in terms of public realm. We come all the way down Marylebone Lane onto Wigmore Street, which runs east-west. We cross over just north of where you're broadcasting from in the southern section of Wimpole Street and back to Cavendish Square. And we've got a couple of outliers there. We've got the Royal Society of Medicine at the bottom on the left. And on the right-hand side, we've got the freehold of that block on Cavendish Square, which includes the university and a number of offices, such as the ones occupied by Mayfair Capital and Orion. So just to, that's the geography. In terms of 92 acres, we own probably 70% or have a direct influence over 70% or thereabouts of all of Harley Street, and about 70% as well of the retail on Marylebone High Street and Marylebone Lane. To give you an idea of rental income and value, the current income is about 123, 124 million pounds per annum, and the gross asset value is around 4.2 billion. So to put that into context, that puts us on a par, in fact, slightly ahead of Great Portland Estates. I guess we're a similar sort of size to Derwent, London, a bit smaller perhaps, and similar to Shaftesbury, and very similar to the capital value of the Grosvenor Estate in London, and Portman are close by neighbours, and Cadogan. They're all similar businesses to ours, family owned. And then to give you just a flavour of the split in income, our biggest income now comes from medical, which is a section, an element of the estate that we've really been investing in over the last decade. And we've got world-class hospitals there and other practitioners. That's about 30%, just over a third of, or just under a third of the income. Interestingly, residential retains our biggest value. By income, that's about 24, 25%, but is still the biggest by capital value terms. Third is, in terms of rental income, is offices at about 22, 23%. Then retail, which is perhaps surprising, only at 15%, because most people, if you talk about the Howard Walden Estate or Marylebone High Street, we'll talk about the retail. That is such a shop front for us. And then the rest is made up of education, hotels, and others. So that gives you a feel for the mixes. It's fabulous having everything within one location. So the furthest property for me from the office is a 10-minute stroll, which means that gives us really special insight. You know, we're constantly bumping into our customers, our occupiers, getting intelligence. And it's a real community, as you know, from living and, well, from working around here as well, Neil.
Yeah, I've worked in Marylebone and on the estate since I started the business. I was originally in Welbeck Street, then I was in Queen Anne Street in 2 buildings, then we were in Wigmore Street. So I'm afraid we've just slightly moved out of the estate. We're neighbours. We're near neighbours now.
No,
I love it around here. I love it. I've seen when I went from 20 odd years ago, Marylebone High Street, when it was full of charity shops and empty units. It's just fantastic now. It's a great place. I mean, and the residential development in the area has been quite spectacular, really, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you're right. It's retail that kicked it off, the revitalisation. Waitrose was an absolute game changer. And the guy here who's been a continuum all the way through is Simon Bainham, our property director, 23 years. That's relatively new, I've got to say, in terms of joiners here. But Simon and Andrew Hynard, the chief executive at the time, were instrumental in introducing Waitrose. That was a game changer. We have still got the very best charity shops in Oxfam and Cancer Research UK, but we've got a great mix, and it's played back to me in terms of other retailers. Nice group of independent food specialists, for example, Ginger Pig and so forth. And that was a game changer, and that's allowed us to invest heavily in the estate over the years. And the other thing I should add, of course, is that it's a very historic nature. You know, many of the buildings go back 100, 200 years. So we're quite constrained in terms of planning because of the listing of a couple of hundred buildings. But therein it gives us a lot of charm and attraction. Yeah,
I've got a question for you. Anyone, feel free to jump in. Anyone online, you can send a question and we'll see it. Anyone else here wants to jump in with a question, please interrupt me. I just want to ask you, Andrew. So, with the current state of the market and the way people are changing their occupation, you've got serviced offices, you've got pop-up retailing. How's that affecting you guys?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of change going on, clearly. And in fact, it's interesting because you were telling me earlier you occupy, I think, one of the office groups, TOG's buildings. Yeah. And over the last 3-4 months, I've spent a lot of time with colleagues here visiting and being visited by a good number of the flexible office occupiers. And I think that's something that would play out really well on the estate here. If we could get the right building, we find that a lot of the occupiers may establish themselves here, grow. We keep in touch with them, and sometimes they return. And there's a great affinity. But to come back to the question, flexibility, shorter leases are definitely happening. It's a question in the office space of getting the right buildings. One of our developments, 5153 Welbeck Street, would have lent itself very well to that type of use. In the end, we've gone for a multi-let solution. But yes, I think we've got 1 or 2 buildings in sight, and I think we will introduce shorter leases, multi-occupation, and I don't think that'll be restricted to offices. In our case, I think we'll do that with 1 or 2 of our medical buildings, so we can get specialist medical practitioners operating in a consultant's house, but in a very modern environment with all the cool aspects of great digital connectivity, cafes, breakout space, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how the world of occupation is changing, because you go back, it's not so long ago where if you sold someone you were in a serviced office or a license somewhere, people would have thought you didn't have a real business. And the nature of occupation has changed so dramatically. And it's so easy now. Technology makes it so easy. I mean, moving offices now is literally unplugging and plugging in. It takes 2 seconds. So it's very interesting how the world's changed. And can I ask you something on a personal note? How do you find the difference now that you're on that side, so to speak, as from being an agent? Because of course you've crossed over. So how do you find the difference in your working day and the way you go about things? Is it
really interesting? Yeah, no, I got to say, probably the most questions I get asked is just that one. What's it like going from advisory to principal side, and how different is it? So I think the first thing is, having had a career initially in investment, retail investment, and always in capital markets, I latterly became more nationwide and more client-wide. So it became very much a senior leadership role with clients and at JLL. And as such, I think I became more of a trusted advisor. And I would certainly find situations where I'd be sitting almost across the table with the client, with my colleagues from JLL on the other side of the table. So, you know, over time and with maturity, I think you morph quite a bit in towards a client's perspective. And the transition to here at Howard Walden really couldn't have been easier, because it's such an established business. It's not as though I had to do anything radical, that we were starting a business. It literally was a question of coming in, succeeding Toby Shannon with a very established team. I mentioned Simon, Mark Kilday, the finance director. And so, you know, frankly, the first thing I had to concentrate on is not screwing up, because it's such an established ship that's going so well. And as such, you know, you get great advice. You've got great colleagues to work with, and you know, the transition, I'm pleased to say, wasn't a shock in terms of a mindset from advisory to principal. You still consult. We're going to slowly and steadily progress, because stand still at your peril. But you know, this place is fabulous in terms of its maturity, the shape and size and style of the business. So it's just a question of incremental advances, as everybody has to. You talk about you know, incredible change. Well, that is happening and affecting us all, and we'll continue to tweak the model, but there's nothing radical to be done. So rightly or wrongly, it feels as though it's been a comfortable transition, and it's lovely to be on the other side. It's a very good environment, and you know, a nice time in my career to make the switch, which was pretty unexpected, but I'm absolutely thrilled with it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. I'll tell you what. Let's bring in Paul. Because I tell you what, because I thought there's some of the questions that I've got, and maybe others I think might be suitable for both of you. So Paul.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about Nimbus.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's interesting how you guys came up with the idea of Nimbus, and I just thought maybe you could tell people how you came up with the idea and what it's all about. I can show people slightly what it is on screen, just to give them an idea. So this is
us, yeah, absolutely.
Anybody goes to nimbusmaps.co.uk.
This is us. Yeah. So I suppose our background is so myself and my brother set this business up, Nimbus Maps, about 3 years ago, and that kind of span out of a professional service business we've got. So we're a business called Assure Property Group, where over the course of the last sort of, I guess it was kind of 2010, 2012 sort of time, where all the pubs were closing down, we ended up doing quite a lot of work for some of the big pub companies. So we did lots of work for like Punch Taverns and Admiral Taverns and people like that, trying to stop those pubs either closing down or being fire sold and being sold sort of below market value in effect. So did a lot of work with them, trying to build out convenience stores, get some residential consents and this sort of stuff. And what we found was that as we were looking at those estates, we were sort of trying to say, well, actually, how do you find those properties within an estate of 6,000 or 10,000 pubs? How do you find out where the opportunities lie in effect? And we found we were using data to do that. So what we then did is started to build those data sets, started to enrich those, kind of sort of saying, starting off saying, well, how big are the sites? What are the demographics around them? Kind of, are they listed? Do they flood? All these kind of things that you kind of usually expect to look at through a development appraisal. And we found, well, actually, as you're kind of going through that process, when you're 3,500 through a list of 6,000, you've gone a sort of Groundhog Day times 10, sort of realized actually data's got to be the answer. So we started then building those data sets, and say that's what then gave birth to Nimbus Maps. So now Nimbus Maps then gives you access to all those kind of data sets we were using. So it kind of gives you ownership, site sizes, building footprints, listings, all that sort of stuff, all in one platform. Then kind of different ways in which you can kind of search and mine those kind of opportunities in effect through the whole of the UK in effect. So as we sort of started to scale out across those pub estates, we realized we had to get the data across for the whole of the UK, and that then gave birth to Nimbus Maps. So that there's two products. There's a free version, which is Nimbus Maps Essentials, and you can sign up for that online. It's totally free. That gives you in effect land registry kind of on steroids. So it sort of gives you the ownership. You can click around the map, search, sort of using that sort of Google Maps kind of search, and from that you can literally kind of get your ownership information, get your sort of these site size and this sort of stuff, and then some kind of characteristics, sort of looking at some of the constraints, give you kind of whether the building's listed and things like that. It kind of tells you, gives you that kind of that flag in effect. And then in Elite, it kind of goes on to the next level, which is the paid for platform, where in effect we kind of then can cut and carve those estates and say, well, actually, how do I find land opportunities? How do I find, if I've got those kind of offers on Welbeck Street and stuff, how do I know whether the offers that I'm getting from those national retailers are the right ones? How do I know whether they'll take a 15-year lease with unbroken with RPI uplift rents in there? How do I know whether that's going to be the case, or whether they're going to force in those 5 and 10-year breaks for me and give me upwards and downwards rent reviews? How can we find that out? Well, we can go and look back through the estates, in effect, driving through that land registry data, linking that all back together and understanding how sort of downing the cops of lease and this sort of stuff. So you can kind of get into huge amounts of information around and understand occupiers properly and property owners properly kind of very quickly through the platform. That's kind of where it came from and kind of now where it's going, in effect. We've got about...
I want to show everyone this, actually. This is interesting. Yep. Your data set providers.
Yeah.
Because obviously some big names, National Grid, Environmental Agency, English Heritage, etc. You see, I think that being sort of doing a little bit of tech as we do, the world of tech has changed so dramatically in that people are prepared to collaborate and share data. Whereas
Absolutely.
If you go back a few years, if you go back a couple of years, people were holding on to their data very much so.
Absolutely.
And in fact, Andrew, you think about how the big firms were very much keeping the data to themselves because they wanted the leg up on the competition. It's changed dramatically, and it's interesting how, Paul, how the data is available.
Absolutely. What we find as well is kind of really interesting is that data that's created for one purpose is actually really valuable in other areas. So kind of things like your EPC data becomes really powerful for calculating rates per square foot on residential values, things like that. So actually sharing just any data often then creates opportunities that you don't expect often.
And who do you find your main customers are?
So we've got anything from, so our biggest customer is GVA. They're just taking a company-wide subscription for us, 860 licenses they've taken, right the way down to one-man band developers looking for parcels of land at the back of gardens to go and build a few houses at the back and those sorts of things. So typically it's agents, it's typically anybody that's doing deals really. And then there's kind of the professionals that kind of sit alongside those as well. So we've kind of got sort of a great spectrum sort of from right down to the smallest up to the biggest.
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I was looking at your data providers there.
Yeah.
One of them that stood out is Airbus. What on earth can they provide you with?
So that's really cool, actually. So this is kind of one of the things that, so when Airbus fly, obviously loads of airplanes across the UK every day. And when they do that, they bounce radars off the ground. So in effect, you then get this very rich data set of kind of spot measurements of height across the whole of the UK. So we're able to provide topographical, so levels surveys in effect across the whole of the UK of very, very granular levels. So within sort of 1 meter centers in effect. So every single point of a 1 meter grid across the whole of the UK in effect, we've got a spot height measurement for it above sea level.
Gotcha.
So then we can provide topo surveys at the blink of an eye, quite frankly, kind of within 24 hours kind of time it takes our data scientists to go and dig the files out and put them together in effect. But of course, with that, because you've got complete coverage, you can then see over the side fence that you couldn't do on a normal topo survey because the surveyor goes out and measures the boundaries of the site in effect. So this is kind of part of the thing is that all this data that's kind of gathered, there's so many sort of fringe ways in which they can be used. Like Airbus never started flying airplanes over the UK, so I could provide topo surveys to our customers, obviously, but actually it's really powerful data.
Do you am I correct in thinking if I wanted to, I could go to each one of these data set providers and get the information myself? Is that correct? But part of what you're doing is you're making it easy for people so that they can actually take it all in one place, and as a result you're able to compare the information with a property hat on.
Pretty much, yeah. So not in all cases, but most cases. And I think the other value that we add is that once you've got all the data in one place and all linked together, then you can take bits and pieces of different data sets together. So you can sort of start to say, well, I'm interested in planning applications that are of this particular size, and I want to see them only in these particular locations, and I want to see those that aren't listed and those that don't flood and all that sort of stuff. And you can be very, very, you can search in a way that you couldn't do otherwise, really, because otherwise you take that ownership file and you start looking at properties over a certain size or something like that, and then you sort of have to then the output becomes so big in effect you can't then sort of cut and carve it up. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're provide. So really, people are researching opportunities, or they're searching opportunities which aren't, I suppose, on the market, or they're offered something on the market. They're trying to collect data in order to see more about the building that they're considering buying or even selling.
Absolutely. And then kind of all the bits and pieces sort of spin off the back of that as well, in terms of, looking at those occupiers. What are they doing? What are they paying? Are they paying the right rents? Are they paying have they got the right covenants in those leases? Are they offering you their best deal or not? It's all of that sort of fringe stuff that then becomes very powerful as you kind of carry daily life in effect.
Sorry, just to pick up on that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. You're saying you carry data on what people are paying in terms of rent?
Yeah. So in effect, we've got all the leases that register with the land registry in the platform, and you can search and filter those. You can search them by date, you can search by location, you can search them by the individual business or the group of the structure of the business. So in effect, all the parent companies, all the subsidiaries of that particular business, all the associated companies with it. So you can search for all of that, and you can then pull it all together and download the leases through the platform. So from that, you can build that very neat understanding of, well, actually, this particular business or this particular business sector is taking these leases. These are the last 20 leases they've taken. Download copies of all of those, flick through the relevant clauses of it, and understand what rent they're paying, but then down to the minute detail of are they taking FRI leases, or are they taking up and down with rent reviews, or are they taking RPI or CPI and all that sort of stuff. So you can dig right into the detail of what that deal really looked like.
Interesting. Okay, so I've got another question for you, which I think I've been interested in Andrew's view as well. So you're very much in the prop tech world.
Yep.
And we do our bit as well in the prop tech world, as you know.
Yeah.
How do you think prop tech is actually changing our business, our industry? Because there's quite a lot of prop tech companies out there, but there's not many that are actually making an impact yet, or have actually managed to succeed, in my view. A lot of talk and not a lot of doing. So what's your view of that?
I think it's moving. And I think that because, so we do, one of the things we do with the platforms is the two platforms that we've got, we also do bespoke services. So that bespoke service kind of says, well, once you've got your head around the kind of data sets that we've got in the platform, or the information we can kind of provide, I've got these particular questions that are particularly relevant to me. And actually from that, can you give me those kind of queries that are kind of interesting? So can you give me an output of all the properties? Because properties in the UK feel like they're infinite. It feels like there's so many. There's always different kind of road I can drive down and sort of and dig and sort of find something I didn't realize was there, in effect. What we're now finding is that those kind of bespoke queries that are coming back to us used to be the realms of the really big companies. So the big housing associations we're working for, the banks we're working for, all those kind of companies. But what I'm now finding is actually that sort of the middle tier of developers are coming in and saying, do you know what? I've got this fund that wants to back me to go and build out 50 student apartments, something like that. Can you kind of help with that? So actually, where it was the top tier that's kind of got the head around the data and kind of how do I site find, how do I find the relevant buildings, use those PD rights for offices, use the PD rights for industrial units, whatever it might be. How do I find those opportunities? You're now finding the middle tiers doing that, but then also down to the sort of the very smaller, the much smaller developers who are kind of, I'm looking for 3 sites a year and I'm going to knock up 3 houses on each of those sites, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep churning that. Thanks very much. Those guys are now starting to come forward and saying, well, based on this data that you've got, can we cut and carve the data sets and say, well, actually, I'm only interested in this part of Guildford or whatever, and I want to see these little properties that are all kind of between quarter of an acre and an acre or something like that, and I want to kind of then approach all the owners. Can you, rather than make me go and sit and download all these title registers, how do I get in touch? How do I mail merge? How do I do all that sort of stuff? And so actually you're sort of finding that traction's coming through where it was in the big boys kind of doing their big thing. Now we're kind of right down to the sort of the man on the street, in effect.
Yeah, interesting. Andrew, how do you see it?
Yeah, and it's fascinating because we're from a very traditional background, and I think the information that we've got on our estate, the 92 acres, we've probably got the best information. Although it never ceases to amaze me how quickly you can look at a building, look it up on an index, and get almost perfect information as well. So from our perspective, it's slightly different, but in the market more generally, the data is getting more complete, more accessible, more perfect. And that naturally leads into the question is, what is the role of the advisor, the agent? And, we have seen a certain amount of disruption, but there's a long, long way to go, yes. And I think the pace will pick up. If we go on for a moment to the role of the advisor. And I think that is the critical piece. It's armed with great data. We can find out generally who owns what. I suppose we still need advice as to how to get to that international owner or local owner, if there's just a name. But what the practitioners, what the owners, the fresh investors, developers are really wanting and really need is the advice bit. And so, traditional broking is, as we know, struggling. It's in many ways, not least disintermediation, fee squeeze, etc. But it's the advice input, which is the occupier that's going to come in, or an adjoining owner, or something which is critical for the agency world to keep relevant. But as I prepare for board meetings and things like that now, in the old days, I guess I would have called up economists, I would have called up agents. Now you can source up to the minute detailed insight just on the click of a mouse on the laptop.
Yeah, I think I've also got a suggestion that I think that part of the reason, maybe the smaller developers and maybe also agents are, for example, coming to you, Paul, is as the market has become more difficult, people are looking for solutions, and I think the downturn is driving that interest in technology. I mean, for what we do, I would say 2 years ago, no one had heard of the term prop tech. A year ago, no one had heard of the term blockchain. As you know, we do in the side business of click to purchase, we record data in blockchain ledgers. The interest level in it in the last, I would say, 6 months has increased dramatically. And so I do think that the agency world and the advisory world is changing. I think that there's been a marked shift actually in the last 6 months of realizing this is there to help people rather than to disrupt people. But I'm going to come on to disruption in a moment, because there is something that we're doing which actually the market might find quite interesting. So right, who's got any more questions? Del, I think you had something for Andrew, didn't you?
Yeah, Andrew, I was going to ask you, given sort of what's going on at the moment, with retailers, it's well publicized at the moment how the retailers are all struggling. In fact, I've just seen Next to the latest one today to come out and say, I think they're saying it's their toughest trading period in 25 years, and you've got all the obviously the downturn in the London property residential market. You've obviously got a very, very, very diverse and large number of occupiers within your estate, and I was just wondering how this is, in what way this is all impacting on your estate generally.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, I mean, sadly, we're not immune to the wider issues around the economy and so forth. So kicking off with retail, I mean, the high street we talked about, Marylebone Lane, that's been phenomenally successful. And the problem with success comes a clamour from other occupiers to be there, which drives the rents. The rents being driven drives the business rates. Inflation that's come through, we know the woes of the online, etc. So it's all about keeping relevant in terms of retail and being understanding and sympathetic to those retailers who can or cannot trade at the prevailing rental values. So the best rents in Marylebone High Street are now £425, £450 Zone A, which has probably doubled or thereabouts over the last 5 years. And we know what makes us different is the range of independent retailers as well as multiples. And our attraction and relevance is down to that mix. So we engage really closely with the retailers. We know what's going on. In some cases, we've got good visibility to turnover figures. And we'll work hard to maintain the right mix and keep revisiting it, because it does change pretty rapidly. So yeah, I think being respectful at the same time, keeping an eye on retailers of the future and not being shy about parting company with retailers, either for whom it's not working or profitable, or perhaps just not appealing. What we have worked on doing in recent years is, in the case of retail, is getting more control. So whereas before retailers could assign their leases, now we'll try and get a situation where it's offered back to us first. Obviously, we will pay the right premium, market premium, but that gives us greater influence as opposed to a lease just being assigned to a third party. Otherwise, across the estate, I say we've got a good balance of occupational demand and space. We don't have much in the way of voids. Offices, we've seen a good move into the location, particularly from hedge funds, private equity, who may have been in Mayfair of higher rents, and they really enjoy coming to this part of the world. Whereas Neil mentioned earlier, there's a real sense of buzz, community, and it helps them hire and retain their key staff. And then on the medical side, which I mentioned earlier, is a really big part of our portfolio. That's a very dynamic and changing industry. There's no doubt technology there will play its part in terms of being able to diagnose people without necessarily face-to-face consultation. But in the healthcare world, we find that we've got a greater demand currently than there is space. So again, it's about, a bit like retail, it's about curating, getting the right specialisms, working with the operators. So in fact, each year we partner with 15 to 20 of our clinical practitioners, and I'm just holding up here the little production we did. This year we took 17 clinical partners to Arab Health, which I describe to people as MIPIM on steroids, literally, because MIPIM attracts 35,000 people. To this conference in Dubai, there are about 130,000 punters, and they're very, very focused on every aspect of healthcare, and that's good for us. We go as a collective. It gives us a chance to reinforce the brand to potential international visitors, and it's very good for working with our occupier clients.
I suppose also, you said earlier that 15% of your income or value was retail?
15% by income, so it'll be slightly higher by value.
Okay, so you're affected, but not too much by the woes in the retail market.
But the interesting point, Neil, is it really is one of our key differentiators and shop fronts. So I'd be very happy having a higher proportion of value in retail, even if it stays at 15%. The impact and the benefit, if we get that right and continue to get it right, is worth far more than that 15%. When I'm talking to friends who are not in the property world and I'm explaining that I'm working at a family estate similar to Grosvenor, they say, well, where is it? They may not have heard of Howard Walden, but when I say we're in Marylebone, they say, oh, that's the high street, isn't it? The high street and Harley Street are what we're known for. So if we've got a vibrant, successful high street, which benefits the residents, we've got 800 residential units. It benefits the occupiers, the office occupiers, and importantly, actually, for our medical visitors, it's a welcome distraction and an attraction for them to be able to spill out into the other amenities around Marylebone and the wider West End.
Well, I assume you've got the advantage that because you own the estate, you can take more of a view than if you're an institutional owner of a shop in a high street. You can look at the bigger picture, and it is true. It's got a lovely mix of occupiers and restaurants. It really has. It's a pleasure driving down the high street each day. I really do enjoy it, and also you do, and you're true. It's exactly what you say, Andrew. You do bump into people. Yeah,
there are a lot of property folk around, actually. John Milligan's just moved in. Do you remember John?
I do remember John, yes.
Of Milligan Retail. He's literally just moved out of Grosvenor Street, 100 yards from the building here, from the office.
Oh, well, there you are, you see. Proof of concept. I'm going to ask, let me ask another question, if I may. I'm going to ask Paul. Paul, my favourite topic. blockchain.
Okay.
What are you doing anything in Nimbus in relation to that?
Not a fat lot, no. I think it's going to be quite interesting, I think, because, kind of land registry and blockchain, why isn't land registry moving on to blockchain? I think blockchain comes in, land registry version 1.0, maybe where we're at now, probably comes in version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. I don't know quite which yet. But I think what's kind of really interesting with blockchain is that actually a lot of the stuff that we're capturing, so we're kind of almost getting to that point where we can kind of do that local search, kind of get you all your planning histories, get you all that sort of stuff that's kind of nearby. Actually, why is that not all set on blockchain, and why is that not then built into the fabric of the transaction? I think there's kind of some really interesting stuff that could be done around that. We're I suppose from that point of view, in terms of the data and the information we're providing, I don't think blockchain is quite going to be the answer just yet. I think certainly version 2, 3, 4, absolutely. And I think that should really kind of tie in with the land registry, could tie in with various other parts of that data set, because in effect, that information, that kind of the underlying constraints that sit behind the buildings and the transactions going forward. Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So I've got a question for you, Andrew, from Al Falcon. Historically, I'm sure that the Howard Walden estate is a holder of property. Is he in the market to add to the estate, and are there buildings that he has an interest in now? It sounds like, are you a buyer?
Interesting. Yeah,
maybe,
we are.
Maybe Richard has got property for you.
Ah, great. Okay. Just to clarify, the 92 acres is the extent of our property ownership. So historically we've held assets outside Marylebone, but now it's the 92 acres all within this particular location. In terms of purchases, and we typically buy, we probably average at 20 to 50 million pounds a year of acquisitions. But today, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be either within the estate or adjoining strategic interests adjoining the estate, where we can generally add value, get greater influence and control. So a good example of that, Neil, would be an office building on Chandos Street, which was bought a couple of years ago. It gives us currently an office use, but it's quite a good footprint and scale of building, which gives us options. I suppose we can either continue with it in the long term as an office. An obvious alternative use will be medical.
I know that building, actually.
Yeah, quite a few agents have been in there over the years.
Yeah.
We're buying another building close by to that, which is also offices, because as a number of our offices have gone to medical use, so our proportion of offices have gone down. So to answer the question, yes, we're in the market. I'd be very happy to add to our retail in particular, but we will continue to invest, but for the time being, on patch on the estate or thereabouts.
Okay.
If anybody wants to know what's in the estate, I've got it up on Nimbus Maps right here, actually. And if you want to see who owns the buildings next door, I've got that right up here too. So if anybody's interested, can I share my screen?
You come down for a beer.
I don't think you can share your screen because I control things.
Oh, I see.
But,
okay.
Sorry about that. but what I would say is part of what we do at these hangouts is really just try and bring people together, and with no real agenda. We're not trying to earn fees or anything. So in all seriousness, if anybody out there would like to meet Paul on a personal introduction to talk about Nimbus Maps and trial and use it, or would like to meet Andrew because they've got properties or opportunities on the Howard Walden estate, please let me know, or let Dale know, or anyone or Graham, anyone in our organisation, and would be only too pleased to put you in touch.
Neil, something I thank you for that, and something I don't think I've talked perhaps enough about, given the scale of it, is residential.
Okay.
So we've got about 800 units, of which 730 or so are let on short-term tenancies. So short-term leases, typically a year, and you feel the ups and the downs very quickly. And clearly, central London's had its challenges over the last couple of years. So there's been a bit of downward rental pressure, but we've been adding to the residential component. We've been doing rooftop extensions and creating more residential space. So our residential income is about the same, although strictly on a like-for-like basis, it will have come off a bit. Our aim for every occupier, but particularly for residential, is for people to pay a market rent, but for them to get and feel they're getting something over and above. So it's the bigger value proposition. And that starts with the environment and the community that we've got here. And increasingly, we are using devices, working and engaging closer with our occupiers to bring them together. So a good example this morning is I'm through another former colleague of ours, Rowan Shah, who you may remember.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, Rowan's got Marylebone Asset Management. He introduced me to a good friend of his who happens to be high up. He's an international director at Travelodge. He lives in a property not a million miles away from the office where I am here. He's one of our occupiers. And we had a really interesting chat this morning where I was able to hear from him as to what he thinks is good, what he thinks there are in terms of opportunities. And there's that little sort of community introductory network, in a way, what you're doing now online, which brings additional benefits and enjoyment.
Yeah.
But residential is big part for us. Very vibrant. We've always got units available there, and that's a classic case. If there's anybody who wants to come and have a look around, we've got a brilliant team here, and we've got a few units available at the moment.
You're not selling anything?
We're not selling, no.
Okay. Right, I'm going to change subject slightly. I want to bring in some news, if I may. And I'm interested to hear everyone's response. So let's talk about click to purchase for one moment. So click to purchase, as you know, is a side business which we run where you can buy buildings online. And we have developed it over some years where you can buy a building online by private treaty, best offers, or auction. But I want to talk about the auction side of it. The auctions that we have done in the past and we've run, and we don't really run that many actually, but the system and the technology does allow it. Our auctions are live. It's tap, tap, tap. It's, live auctioneer interacting with the bidding audience. Any more bids, any more bids. The idea being that we didn't want to recreate the way the auctions operated. We just wanted to put it online. Because all the other systems out there are eBay style systems. I don't like eBay style systems. I don't think I would want to bid on a property in an eBay style. I think that you feel a bit you're not attached to you're not interacting with the auctioneers. You're not interacting with the other bidders in the same way. And the key point is none of the eBay style systems around create binding contracts of sale with digital signatures on electronic contract notes, which is what we do. So that's what we've been doing as a business. And we then record all that in blockchain, as I'm sure you all know, because I talk about it all the time. We are just releasing, and I can say even just today we've gone live with a fourth sales channel for the business. And we felt that there was clearly a demand for eBay style auctions in certain parts of, in Ireland in particular, where we have some clients in Ireland. And we decided we might as well try and meet the demand. But we thought, well, we've actually got this live auction system. So should we create an eBay style system? And we thought, let's go one better. So as of today, we've actually started offering artificial intelligence auctions. And what that means is that if I or someone using click to purchase wants to auction a property, rather than bid against me or Dale or Graham or Andrew, you would call in the artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence will be the auctioneer and will conduct the auction in the same way as an auctioneer standing on a rostrum. So what that will mean is for the bidder, the bidding experience is exactly the same as it has been so far. You make your bid. Thank you for your bid. Are you sure? Going, gone. I'll change the bid increment. But that is now being run by an artificial intelligence. Now, the advantages of that are that an AI will collect data and will make, over time, the experience of bidding for both buyer and seller more and more smooth. It can't make mistakes. But more importantly than anything else, it is beyond any possible manipulation because the bidding is operated by a computer system in a manner which the market is used to. So artificial intelligence auctions go live today, and as far as I'm aware, world first. The first auctions are yet to be announced. The stock obviously needs to be obtained, but the product is now available. So I've been saying for some time that I think the live auction room is closing. And I think this is the first piece of technology of click to purchase, which I would say is disruptive because I can't see a future of the ballroom auction. And I would say I give it a very short life. And I'm not trying to put people out of work. But it was what you were saying earlier, Andrew. I think the world that we operate in is changing. So that's a new piece of technology. Anybody watching the Hangout heard it first here. It should be, our official launch will be Monday. If anybody's interested to learn about it, please let me know. So what do you think of that, guys?
I think that's fascinating. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I think really kind of interesting in terms of kind of the role that I see the agent adding value to. And I guess the auctioneer, I'm not prepared for the auction example here, but my take on where agents add value is that negotiation piece. It's getting that right value out of the deal that's being put forward. And I think that's very interesting. Saying, well, actually, do you replace that with AI? That's a very, very interesting question. Can that bot in the background, can that create such a good experience, as good an experience as the experienced auctioneer? I suspect it probably can. So it's a very interesting position, because in my head, that the agent, where the agent adds the most value is that kind of clever negotiation, that kind of push back at the right time and accepting at the right time and squeezing the last penny out of the deal. Now, if that's then done through AI, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Very disruptive.
Yeah, Neil.
Yeah.
Neil, I think it's fascinating. I think it's evolving. I think with the whole prop tech advancement, it's gathering pace. Things are changing quicker. Mind you and I would have said 10 years ago that the auction room was dead, and it survived very effectively, mainly dominated in the commercial world by Allsop, who've continued. But the main firms have bailed out, haven't they?
Yeah.
CBRE, Cushman's, JLL. So it's Allsop, Acuitas. And there's something of a buzz, of an atmosphere in a room. And I think live bidding, if you've got the right circumstances, will squeeze a very good number. It's not particularly efficient, but I suspect it'll continue, but with fewer players. But the pace of change is quicker. Mind you, I thought driverless cars 2 years ago. If you'd asked me driverless cars, I had been convinced by a few people that we'd be seeing that in short order, but that's taken a huge step back in recent months.
Yeah, but driverless cars are coming. There's no question.
Mm.
See, what I've seen is that the pace of change, it's not just the change that's occurring, it's the pace of change. And I genuinely do believe that the auction room is going to die. And I don't mean that. I just think that the businesses who are operating auctions at the moment need to adapt. You see, interesting enough, I've heard this comment quite a lot, Andrew, about you can squeeze in an auction room. But there's plenty of people who don't like going to auction rooms. There are plenty of buyers who find it very intimidating. If you go to an auction room, you find the dealers are there. They're always at the back having a cup of tea, all clubbing together. And they're all, it's the occasional person who hates that experience because they find it so intimidating. So we'll have to see. I think the other
interesting with that is it's kind of the auction houses. We've always found very difficult because you've got to do all your due diligence first, your legal due diligence to make sure what you're buying is the right thing. Of course, if you then overlay the blockchain example, where you've then kind of got all that due diligence already done, you kind of know that the building's fine before you buy it, then it's very interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting.
I think so. I think it's only going to go one way, to be honest with you. We just happen to be first. I've had a question from Rob Simmons. He says, how can a bidder be certain that the AI isn't taking bids off the wall? Well, the answer, Rob, is you can't. The AI is allowed legally to take bids off the wall up to the reserve. Interesting enough, in Ireland, you can't. In Ireland, where we are also live, you're not allowed to bid, but the system does provide for that. So you're absolutely right. But if you think about it, we've all done this. We've all said it. We've all gone to auction rooms, and there are some auctioneers who are good, and there are some auctioneers who aren't so good. And sometimes it's very obvious when an auctioneer is taking a bid off the wall. If you've got an AI doing it, it's not obvious, and therefore, surely for the seller, it's a better result. We will have to see. If any of my competitors are watching, I'll be very interested to supply you with an AI auction package at a price to be negotiated. Okay, so we've been online for an hour. So unless we have any more questions, unless anyone's got any more points they'd like to raise, I think it'd be a good point to wrap it up. Oh, I've got a question. Sorry, 1 point. 1 point. We always ask a question for people who want to get a CPD certificate. So here's a question. I wonder if any of you guys know the answer to this. On this day in 1983, what did Ronald Reagan announce? Graham, Graham, you ready? You got an answer for me?
What did Ronald Reagan
This day in 1983, what did President Ronald Reagan announce? He's looking, Andrew, you're looking up on your phone, aren't you?
No, I've got to make a call in a second.
I'm just Googling it, yeah.
All right, shall I give you the answer? I'll give you the answer, which is quite relevant with our tech talk. He announced a space-based defense system called Star Wars. 1983, which sounds like we need it at the moment, the way things are going. So let's hope it's working. Let's hope there's no bugs. Right, I think that wraps it up then. So anybody wanting a CPD certificate, there's your answer. You need to tell me the answer, or Faye, or Luann, or Dale, or Graham, etc. So at that point, we're going to wrap up. I'd like to say thank you very much, Andrew.
Pleasure. Have a good weekend.
One of my old friends in the game. Paul, thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. Much appreciated.
Graham, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Dale.
Thank you.
Neil Singer signing off. Look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks very much.